Hello, everyone. If you're in the chat or will be in the chat, I was just telling Josh literally right before we went live that who else has read this book, aka The Gypsy by Stephen Brust and Megan Lindholm, aka Robin Hobb. But that's what we're going to be discussing. So, Josh, if you want to introduce yourself in case people happen to randomly not know who you are.
Well, I'm Josh. I'm a mega Robin Hobb fan. My channel is called Red Fury Books, and I read a lot of different genres. Fantasy the most, historical fiction, crime fiction, science fiction, some nonfiction mixed in there as well. But I discovered Hobb, I think, 3 years ago for the first time, and she has fast become my favorite fantasy author and like my number 2 favorite author, period. So I was excited to read this, and I'll just ... for that right
Yeah. Yeah, so we read this as part of the whatever the Discord TBR swap thing that I
don't
didn't
remember
take
what we
part
called
in.
it.
Then I was like, you know what, I'll take part at the last minute, and Josh gave me the Gypsy to read and said, hey, we should buddy read it, and we did.
And we did.
And listen, for anyone that happens to be watching this back, listen, I can buddy read on a schedule successfully with people. All right. I don't dust everyone. Okay. Hi, Derry. Oop, sorry, I clicked it. Hi, Derry.
Hey,
Did you
Derry.
read this? I don't think you did. You haven't read it, right? Because
I don't think so, because I think she was lamenting the fact that we had spoiler tags that she couldn't click on.
yeah. So general non-spoiler thoughts. I think the ... says a lot. But how did you like it, or not like it?
So I right before we went live, I was just counting the Robin Hobb / Megan Lindholm books that I've read, and this was number 24. And if I were to rank every Robin Hobb and Megan Lindholm book I've read, this is number 24. So I think that says a lot about it. I had a lot of issues with it. And I don't want to throw it all at Stephen Brust, because I'm not positive. Maybe you know, Evie, I think this was very early Megan Lindholm writing,
Not
because
early 90s?
they don't list any of her books, at least in my edition at the beginning.
Yeah,
So
they just listed Stephen Brust stuff, and it was published in 92. And I know she published stuff in the 80s, so
okay, maybe they just didn't list it, but yeah, I had big problems with just the storytelling in general. I liked the idea, and I liked some of it. I liked the beginning. I love the setup. Thought I was going to enjoy the book, and then about a third of the way through, I stopped enjoying the book. But then I loved how it ended. I thought the last like 30 pages were superb. So overall, it's definitely not my favorite of all of these. But I think my biggest issue was just the way that it was written. I personally struggle. One thing I love about Hobb is long chapters. I love long chapters. It helps me get immersed into her books, 20, 30 pages at a time, and I rarely come up for air between chapters, and I just love that about her. And this book, as you know, was just so disjunct. You would get half a page of something, and then you'd move to a different point of view, and you might be with them for a couple pages, then you'd move again. And I don't know. I felt kind of seasick just going back and forth with all the POVs, and it just wasn't a fun reading experience through about 70% of this book, unfortunately.
and remind me, from a star rating perspective, you give it 3 stars, right?
That was rounded up from 2.5. So I gave
Okay.
it 2.5. Yeah.
Because I was gonna say it's really funny because I gave it like 3.5 rounded up to 4. So it sounded like we were pretty similar, but like on, I don't know, the opposite sides of the thing.
It was a 2 for me until the ending, because I thought the ending was great. I loved the last 30 pages. I think everything, all these disparate elements came together really well.
Yeah.
But the journey wasn't as great as the destination.
Yeah, oddly enough, I actually liked all the shorter chapters. And I thank you for saving my heart. Oh, you're welcome. Or well, you know, I shouldn't be speaking for Josh, but anyways, I actually liked the shorter chapters. Am not I am not well versed really at all in like crime, police procedural type detective fiction. So I was really nervous going into this, but immediately I was just grabbed by the prose. I don't know if it was Stephen Brust, Megan Lindholm, like who, I still don't know who wrote what. And I tried looking it up and I can't find anything. But I really liked all of the perspectives. The thing that I really that made me struggle significantly is at one scene in particular, Lori's character, when she, I guess let's just go ahead and hop into spoilers. Sorry, Derry. Um, the scene where she meets the not Darren. Oh my god, what's his name? The
The
gypsy.
brother, Daniel.
Daniel, thank you.
Yeah.
Meets him and she's with her friends and she's in a place where like it's the ladies of the night section. It was very sudden and it just was like the last scene you had seen her in. She was complaining about her friend abandoning her for Sue or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're here. And I'm like, I can see like, oh, she's trying to, be friends with them, but it just seems so sudden and disconnected that
Yeah,
it just,
I did feel the last time we saw her too, as a character, she had kind of stood up against her friend and was not going to be part of that. And then all of a sudden, she's kind of sucked back in. And
yeah,
um, also, she was 14, so that bothered me.
yeah.
um, yeah, so yeah, that was not great.
I did feel that it was the placement was due to plot, not plot convenience, but like they knew they had to get someplace in the
Yeah,
plot and this character needed to be there, so let's just plop her in there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
if they had fleshed it out a little bit more, but the inciting incident and everything like that, which starts off with the Gypsy character, right? Um,
Who I did like. I did like that character a lot.
I loved all three brothers. I thought they were so fascinating. The whole like fairy fae aspect of it. I'm like, this is so cool. Especially the fair lady. I wanted more of her,
Yeah,
but
we didn't really see much of her. My biggest issue with the brothers was, and maybe you caught something that I didn't, is they all had these different personas when we flashed to their kind of otherworldly aspects. One's the raven, one's the dove, all of those things. I didn't understand the point of all of those. We saw Stepovich as the wolf, and like, okay, that's the embodiment of maybe he's a police officer and he's like very dogged in his pursuits of his criminals and everything. So he, shows himself as a wolf. But I never understood those aspects of the characters other than they had to give them names in this other world, whether they were random or if there was a purpose behind them. So I don't know. Did you catch that? Maybe I missed that, or
I of course my notebook is downstairs and of course I forgot to bring it up. But like you said, one was the raven, one was the owl, and the third brother was, I
was he
don't
the
think he was
he was
ever.
the, was he the dove or was somebody else the dove?
Yes, the dove, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, was he ever named? Um, I don't know if I read online somewhere or if it was in like one of these kind of blurb things that someone mentioned it being a fable. And that just clicked with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Because there's a lot with the fairy fae-esque world perspective, you get a lot of mentions of mythical folklore creatures. So I'm like, okay, this is like a fable, this is a folklore thing. And it made me more forgiving of
Okay.
that aspect.
Yeah.
And especially when it all came around to them all defeating the fair lady, I'm like, okay, all right, this makes sense.
Yeah, my favorite moment with kind of the other world was early in the book, and I think we talked about this on the fireside, how we saw one scene from Stepovich's point of view, and then we saw the same scene from the Gypsy's point of view, and how Stepovich was the wolf and everything. And that's the one I was most excited about this book, because I thought just that idea and how that might be able to permeate what was going on in this story might be really cool to see, just different perspectives of kind of the same scene.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that was about all we got from it. And after that, it became really disjunct for me. But that was probably my favorite scene in the whole book until the end.
I think for me, I do like that scene. I thought that was really cool. I not necessarily the scene, but I liked the dynamic between Stepovich and Durand.
Yes.
Especially like at the beginning when Stepovich or Durand says, "What man wouldn't get it up for the old lady? I mean, the streets are crawling with granny whatevers, aren't they?" And he's like, his internal monologue, Stepovich is saying, someday when Durand had seen what elderly women looked like after, he wouldn't joke about it anymore. And I'm like, damn, that's really heavy. And I liked how they explored their dynamic. And then you get the backstory of Durand's father, like, was obviously a police officer, and Ed, it was Ed, right? Was his name?
The older cop, yeah.
Yeah, requested him to be put with someone he could trust,
Yeah.
which was Stepovich. And I thought that was really spectacular.
Yeah, I thought those dynamics were good. And actually, those were mostly good. I thought occasionally the characters felt a little less fleshed out than I would have liked. We saw, as the book went along, we did see more of the motivations, but I don't necessarily put that on Brust or Lindholm, because I do read a lot of crime fiction, and depth of character is not generally one of the priorities of telling one of those stories. So I was kind of forgiving of that there were aspects of the personalities that we didn't see. But I did like when Stepovich, when we got the older former partner in there, it shined a light on him a lot more. And I think it gave his character a lot more, made him a lot more fleshed out for me. But
Yeah.
I mostly enjoyed the crime sections, but I thought they were too short. It seemed like every time it was like we were with them 4 pages, and then we had to flash half a page over here, and we had to flash a little page here. And that was, again, kind of my biggest problem with this book in general. It reminded me of a book everybody loves. It's not the reason I DNF'd, but I DNF'd Beartown by Frederick Backman. And I DNF'd because of that scene that was going to happen halfway through the book. I wasn't going to read it. But even leading up to that, it was one of those books that I felt like it was giving me adult onset ADD, because it was just constantly switching point of view. And that kind of storytelling for me, I find it tedious. I find it tiresome, and it just wears me out. I can sit with a first person narrative, like all of the Fitz books, forever and be immersed, and it's no problem. But when things are bouncing around so quickly, I just tend to struggle.
Yeah, I was actually just double checking like what the actual timeline of this was, and it's over the course of 12 days. So like
Oh, okay.
it, not to say that I'm excusing it, but it makes sense that it would be that quick.
Yeah. And I wonder how they
Especially
wrote it. I wonder if, like, they bounced back and forth off of each other, or if one person wrote the Stepovich scenes, if one person wrote the Fair Lady scenes. I'd love to know that, what their
I
process was.
I wouldn't be surprised if Lindholm wrote the Fair Lady scenes, because that feels like it's so not bizarre. What's the word I'm looking for? It just
Otherworldly.
yes, there you go.
Yeah.
It just seems like something that she would write, but at the same time, like I really liked the Stepovich scenes, the detective stuff, other than Laurie's whole perspective. It was just very sudden. I
Yeah.
liked the actual craft of the writing, like the writing itself. you know, no matter where the story choices went. So I'm interested to read Stephen Brust's work. I know Matt mentioned that he'd read some
The
of
the Jerrig, yeah.
yeah. Which, by the way, I think I mentioned it on the Discord, but there's a reference to Taltos in this.
Oh,
And it's
there
like,
is.
oh, maybe it was
Yeah.
just an Easter egg. And I'm like, maybe. And then I was reading more and I'm like, no, I think this, like, honestly, doesn't say that it's part of this series, this world, but I think this is an that world, that universe in our real world.
Could
Like
be.
that's
Yeah.
my headcanon. So
Yeah, I had the same thing early on. I was trying to figure out who was writing what parts, and I liked that I couldn't figure that out. But then again, I think a lot of authors, at least good ones, and by all accounts, these are two very good authors. They can be chameleons with their prose, and I think back to like when Stephen King wrote The Talisman with Peter Straub, whether you like that book or not. They alternated chapters, and King basically changed his style to write just like Straub so that nobody would know who wrote what chapters, which is kind of mind blowing. But good authors can do that, and I'm sure both of these authors are able to do that. But I was early on trying to figure out, oh, was that Hobb or was that Brust? And I never could. But you might be right about the fair lady scenes. That does seem like something that would be something that Hobb would write and excel at.
as an aside, speaking of alternating perspectives and taking on writing styles, this is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mutar. That is a masterclass in just author duo craft, where you have they're very distinct writing styles from the beginning, red and blue, and then literally they just start merging writing styles, and it's part of like the narrative flow of it.
Wow.
It's really, really good. But yeah, so I don't know what else to say about this other than like I gave it 3.5 stars, rounded up to 4 on Goodreads. Uh it's not the best Robin Hobb / Megan Lindholm book I've ever read, but it's not the worst book I've ever read. So,
You don't have it lowest on your Hobb list like I do.
I mean, something has to be last.
Yeah, yeah.
Derry, cover your ears if you're still here. Fool's Errand is still last for me. No, I'm just kidding.
I was about to say what?
I mean, it is my least favorite Realm of the Elderlings. Well, it was, and then I reread Live Ship, and now Ship of Destiny is my least favorite.
Wow, that's a hot take.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm saying that this is like at the bottom of the list. That's saying that makes it seem like, oh, this is terrible, but it's still Robin Hobb related, so it's still great. It's not 5 stars. It's not even 4 stars. But
Yeah, what is it? It's like a 3.6 or 3.7 on Goodreads, something like
yeah,
that.
I think it is. I'm very glad. Sorry, let me backtrack. To summarize, I'm glad that I read it. I am not mad that I wasted my time on this book. I'm glad that I read it.
No, and it's a quick read.
Yeah.
It took me longer for a 270-page book or whatever it was to read just because I had trouble getting into that flow because of the disjunct nature of the narrative. But even so, it is a quick read. I mean, we both finished it in just a couple days, really. I mean, it was under a week. So yeah, I mean, no regrets reading it. But the ending, I think the ending brought things together really well. Like when we had chatted on the fireside, I was annoyed every time we flashed away to the brothers who we didn't know yet. But once they got into the action, I really liked them. So it was one of those like I had to just persevere through that because once they got part of the action, except for the insta love with Daniel and Lori, I didn't like that. But except for that, I really enjoyed just all the scenes with the brothers. And when finally, I don't know if convergence is the best term. It's
Yeah,
not
when they
Malaga, but
find what's his face at the bus stop, I'm like, I literally was like, oh, they found him.
yeah, yeah.
Whoop,
Oh,
sorry,
you clicked that one again.
sorry, I accidentally pressed my space bar.
Yeah, like I said, I was in 2-star range, and then the last 30 pages happened, and I did enjoy that, so it bumped up my rating.
Did you well, I'm just gonna say this. So I know that Stephen Brust is a musician. At least he was at the time of this publication, based on the author note.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that all of the brothers had some sort of musical ability and power.
Yeah.
Tambourine, the fiddle, and then arguably the Gypsy had his voice slash vocals, songs, whatever. Um, and it all, I actually underlined this thing, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is just the entire purpose of this story, of this novel, is what's her face? Cynthia, which great callback from the beginning of Cynthia being the one that dies, and then she comes, we come
Yeah.
back around and we see her again. You play for yourselves, she shrieked at them. That is not what the music is for. Play for the world, for life, not safety and blindness and complacency. Play danger and vision and striving. Play evil vanquished and survival. Play life. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the entire, like, this, like, let's write this story just to include this line.
And you said Bruss is a musician, but also I'm very critical of music in books because it's my craft. So when an author gets it wrong, I take notice and I notice it, and it totally pulls me out of the story. Hobb is very good at it. The scene in Fool's Quest, it was masterful. And as I was getting into that scene, that music played such a big part of it, I was nervous because, like, my favorite fantasy author, she can't screw this up. Don't screw this up. And she didn't. It was beautiful. So some of that might have been Lindholm slash Hobb too, because
Maybe.
she does possess the skill to write music, which I think it's a challenge, at least in my experience as a reader. I so often see authors, frankly, they try too hard, and they try to, I don't know, talk about the technical aspects of it. And unless they are musicians, they really don't know what it's like from a technical standpoint to be a musician, when they should just be focusing on the emotion, because that's something they're usually better at talking about. But yeah, that's
What were
interesting. I did like that. I loved how we started the book with a tambourine. That was
Yeah.
cool.
What were your thoughts about, like, I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, I'm just gonna skip the lyrics in the songs," but this has so much, like, literal lyrics, and apparently there was a band that, like, extrapolated these lyrics and expanded upon them and created an entire concept album. I haven't listened to it yet, but what were your thoughts on, like, all the song lyrics?
I liked it, except for the fact that it was too prevalent, just because there were so many breaks, and it was like, oh, you get 4 song lyrics, and then you got 2 paragraphs, and now we got 4 more song lyrics, and then another page, and then 4 more. It was a little
Too
much, I
much.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Maybe. An exercise in, like, I don't wanna say self-indulgence, but, like, since he is the first name on the thing, I would just assume that this was Stephen Brust's, brainchild and baby. It's like, I want to make sure to include this, this, and this. And similar to what's it? Daughter of the Empire. Like,
Yeah.
Raven E. Feist had the idea, and you had these beats that you had to meet, and then Jay
Yeah.
Royce wrote to those. No pun intended with the whole music stuff that we've been talking about, but
No, I'm in general fascinated by author collaborations. Just how they come about, how they work together, because some of them are one-offs like this. And then you get, like, thinking back to, like, early classic fantasy for me was Dragonlance. Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman wrote, I mean, how many dozens of books together? And I always just wonder what the process is when they collaborate.
right.
Whether it's, okay, here's an outline, you take these, I take these. The theory with the Empire trilogy is that each of them basically wrote a book, and then they collaborated on the last book, but it was all outlined ahead of time. That's the theory. I don't know where that theory came from, but um, it's hard to say. I know that there's one thing at the end that I know is Feist, just from reading him a lot, but I don't know. I find it very interesting, and I wish I wish we had more information about this specific collaboration to see how it came about. How it came about, were they friends? Did they just, how does this
It
happen?
just
Like, hey, let's
happened.
write a book together, because I can't imagine, that just being a commonplace thing.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that I could find on Reddit is people are like, this is probably the worst Robin Hobb book. It's not good. Um,
I don't go that far. I just thought it was
it
middling.
was fine. It was fine. It was fine. Ian McCaffrey co-wrote a lot. Andre Norton, Elizabeth Moon, old sci-fi fantasy has a load of collaborations. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder how they go about it. Like, I'm reading another Feist series right now, and the next one in the Rift War cycle that I'll be reading it's actually kind of three standalone novels that he collaborated with three different authors. And I wonder about that. I mean, some collaborations modern day, we know what's going on, where it's just
I was gonna say Brandon Sanderson. We know what's going on.
yeah, we
So
know that, and we know, like, Orson Scott Card has some books in the Ender universe that are basically written by somebody else, but it's
James
Orson Scott
Patterson.
Card but it's, he just lent his name to sell the books. So I don't know. I find the whole thing fascinating, collaborations. And if I ever talk to any of these people, that's something I'd really ask. Like, how do you do this? How do you decide narrative style? How do you decide voice? How do you decide who writes what? And how do you make it cohesive? Because I think just even writing a single book for a single person just seems like the most daunting, challenging thing in the world, let alone having two different voices and writing styles and ideas and being able to put it together. Even a book like this that I didn't love, I still marvel at the fact that two people put this thing together.
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not the worst thing for me that I've ever read. And I appreciate my time with it, and I don't regret reading it. So, I have nothing else to say about this book, honestly. So, do you got
Well,
anything else?
I've been trying to be real positive, so I probably don't have much more.
Oh, let it loose. Be negative. I don't care.
Yeah, no, it was just the narrative style. It just didn't work for me. It just was
I
so
think if
disjunct and
yeah, I think if they expanded it out a lot more, I think it would have been great. Absolutely great. But I think because I don't know if in like the early 90s if they had like page limitations or whatever, or I don't know. Maybe where they're just like, this has to be less than however many words, and this is what we want to do. Um,
it's interesting though. All of Lindholm's books are short, and all of Hobbes' books are epic length. And I know that I've seen somewhere Hobb talk about that when she writes his Hobb, that she takes a while to get to her point. um, but I find even that much interesting. But then again, the style is different. She doesn't really write epic fantasy as Lindholm.
yeah.
Epic fantasy tends to be long. She tends to write urban fantasy, although the reindeer books, which you haven't gotten to those yet, right?
No, no.
Those aren't urban fantasy, but those are more concise storytelling. So even that is just interesting that when she changed and grabbed the new pen name, because they're both pen names, I think. When she grabbed the new pen name, that she even wrote in a different style than the first one. Oh, there we go,
Um,
Margaret Ogden.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's Lindholm is her maiden name for sure.
Okay.
And Megan was just a fluke with her agent, I think.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I had heard somewhere that she had mentioned that Robin Hobb is more like she writes as Robin Hobb when she wants to be more hopeful, and under the Lindholm name when she's more like cynical,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't recall the years, but I feel like apart from the epic fantasy of it all, um, a lot of the Megan Lindholm work is pre 1995
Yeah.
or early in the 80s, early 90s, and everything else is after. and more modern. And I wonder if that's also a kind of a distinction.
And it could be. I mean, I've heard Janie Wertz talk about one of her regrets as an author is that she didn't write under a kind of gender neutral pen name because female fantasy authors were not just selling as many books back then. So, and Robin Hobb, it's obviously a gender neutral name there too. So,
And that actually makes me question if the reason that this collaboration happened is the opportunity to have the Megan Lindholm stuff, like, hey, highlight this author, sell more books type of thing.
yeah.
But
And I also wonder because I know like Feist and Wertz as another example. I'm pretty sure they were friends because even when Feist was writing the Rift War saga, he had mentioned Janie Wertz in some of his acknowledgments about just her insights, and I think she was one of his early readers. So I think that's the way that partnership came together, that collaboration. So
no,
I would love to find out more about these two.
there's nothing on the internet.
Yeah.
Derry, whenever you happen to interview Robin Hobb, because I'm willing it in the universe, please make sure you ask for this. Thank you.
That would be must see TV.
But yeah, speaking of collaborations and joint opportunities, I think even though that wasn't the like ideal reading situation, I think it was a great buddy read,
It
and
was.
I
Yes.
liked it. So it's a success in my book.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and we had talked about doing more. So I know we both want to read all of Lindholm's works at
Yeah.
some
So
point.
the one that other than the reindeer people duology, you said you've read Alien Earth and
I've
Wizard
not. No.
Pigeon.
No,
Well,
all I have left, I've read everything except for Alien Earth and then the four Kai Vandian Quartet or whatever they call it, the Wind
oh,
Singers.
wind
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, those I haven't read those four books or Alien Earth, but I've read everything else.
got it. Okay, so spoiler alert, guys. Hopefully that by the end of spring, we'll do like a recap of the Megan Lindholm stuff. I have to read Wizard of the Pigeons, the Wind Singer, Windhaven, whatever it's called, and Alien Earth, and the Reindeer People. Wait, have you read the Inheritance
Yes.
collection? You
Yes.
have? Okay, I also need to read that. So, no, Anita, I didn't hate every minute of it. But yeah, I literally have nothing else, so I'm just gonna belabor the point of like this was fine. So
It was fine. It was not the best work by this author, but her lowest ranked book for me is still higher than a lot of other authors. So
I think it's worth reading just to not only have say, oh, I've read all of Robin Hobb / Megan Lindholm's work, but also just seeing the growth and the progression of, regardless of who wrote what, just seeing that development as a writer,
yeah, absolutely.
and seeing how potentially themes that were maybe seeded in the Gypsy sprouted into Realm of the Elderlings and other books. So
I look forward to your thoughts on Wizard of the Pigeons.
I tried to read it. Derry, I think I was supposed to buddy read it with you, and I was like, I'm bouncing off of this so hard. So I think now that I've read this, I think I will hopefully have better understanding and better, I don't want to say patience, but more forgiveness of the writing style, because it's like, this is not the Fitz books. This is not
Yeah.
Realm of the Elderlings. What is this writing style? Who's writing this? This is not who I expected. So
I don't know. There's some really great ideas in that book. Um,
and it's set in
yeah.
Seattle, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like the premise behind it for sure. It was a kind of an inspired idea.
And that was her first book?
I think it was. Yeah, that's the only Lindholm book I was able to find in hardcover. Everything else has been paperbacks because that like a 30 year anniversary one came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ones. Yeah, yeah. Sub press maybe or something like that. One of those specialty presses. But
Yeah. I don't think it was Sub Press. I wouldn't be able to afford that. I think it was Grim Oak. Yeah, I think Grim
oh,
Oak.
Grim Oak.
Before Grim Oak, because now they're too expensive too. But
Yeah.
they used to be affordable.
Okay, so everyone, oh, there you go. Definitely the focus on trauma has always been a thing. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I gotta mentally prepare myself. Anyways, I don't want to take up too much more of anyone's time by just repeating the same thing that Josh and I have been talking about for the past 35 minutes. So, any final thoughts, Josh?
I would say, kind of like you said, I don't regret reading it, even if it didn't really work for me. But I didn't dislike it or like it. It was kind of in the middle. I thought that the ending salvaged a lot of the storytelling along the way. And I think there's enough there that I'll still think of it with a little bit of fondness. And the writing's solid. So I wouldn't want to dissuade anybody from picking it up. Maybe just have tempered expectations going in.
And I will second literally everything you said. So, all right, thank you guys for showing up in chat. Even though y'all haven't read this book, I'm pretty sure Josh and I are the only ones that have read this book in BookTube. So, but thank you anyways. Feel free to check it out. Read it because it's still, you know, it's
The
Megan
Queen.
Lindholm related, so it's fine. And you guys have a great night. Bye. In the stream, in the stream.